So we're a very profitable company that's also at a decent size and growing at a pretty fast clip. Our go-to-market is just incredibly efficient, and it's because we use our own technology, our own data that allows us to do it. So yeah, it's been a great ride to be a part of so far.
In this episode, I'm talking to Bryan Law, CMO of ZoomInfo, a B2B software helping companies find, acquire, and grow their customer lists. They have a database of over 400 million contacts globally, and they do over $1.5 billion in revenue per year. We're going to talk about number one, how Bryan thinks about go-to-market strategies, from top of funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, all the way to conversion. Number two, how they excel in each one of their top marketing channels, branding, demand gen, media, and events, and which one of these channels provide the highest ROI. We're also going to try to figure out little things like what's their CAC, cost of acquisition, how much money they spend in marketing per month or per year, and lastly, how much exactly does Bryan make as the CMO? And every time he can't answer a question, we both have to take a shot of delicious and spicy hot sauce from our sponsors. Wish me luck, Martians. I hope you enjoy this one. Hello, Martians. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing on Mars. I'm super excited for today's episode. Today's episode, we have the CMO of ZoomInfo, Bryan Law. I'm excited because I use ZoomInfo every single day for everything that I do. And to finally get Bryan on the show, we're super excited. ZoomInfo, for those that don't know, they essentially one of the largest B2B software companies. They help companies find, acquire, and grow customers. So if you're ever looking for an email on someone to target for your lead gen, you're probably using ZoomInfo. They have 35,000 paying customers, 100 million companies on the platform, and over 400 million contacts globally. Bryan, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So you're calling from Seattle?
Yeah, just outside Seattle in Kirkland. Lived here for a few years now.
Nice. Your background is pretty crazy. We're gonna get into the background. We're gonna get into the company and everything. But before we do that, the theme of the show, we're gonna start off the show with a shot of hot sauce. Oh, you got it.
I do.
Yeah. What do you have? What's your weapon of choice?
It's Bravado, which I like. They're a good one, and I have a couple of glasses of water. So hopefully I don't need both of them, but I'm prepared just in case.
All right, cool. So we're gonna start it off with a shot of hot sauce, and as the show goes on, we're just gonna have a casual conversation. But I'm not gonna filter my questions. So anytime that you cannot answer a question, you plead the fifth. We take a shot of hot sauce, and then we move on. So
sounds fair. I'm gonna use a spoon to help me do it.
I'll do a spoon as well. I'm actually coming to Seattle on the 29th for an event.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. What event are you coming for?
So I'm hosting a founders happy hour for Series A, pre-seed to Series A found startups. Yeah, we have like 100. It's my first event ever that I'm hosting there, and we got like 100 companies coming out. So,
awesome.
Yeah, if you're in the area.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Solid.
So wait, is that habanero or what kind of chili is it?
Jalapeno.
Jalapeno. Okay, I got habanero.
Solid.
Yeah, so hopefully you can answer everything. I'm just looking at your background, and for anyone that's listening, just search up Bryan Law on LinkedIn, so we can go through this together. Very impressive background. So I'm going through the list, and then we'll throw it over to you. Bryan, you've worked at Google for like a year and something, 2014. You worked at Salesforce 2019 to essentially 2022, which is the end of COVID. And then you part of G2 as an advisory member, board member, CMO collaborative, and almost 2 years ago, you joined ZoomInfo. Walk us through your background and how you see the progression of your career. and
Yeah.
just the story behind it.
Yeah, sure. So about half my career was in strategy, both as a consultant and then internally, and then half of it's been in marketing. So the very beginning, I've always been fascinated with people and with data. And so I actually started consulting much more on the
Mm.
people side, and then I switched into overall corporate strategy, company called Monitor Group. It's now part of Deloitte. And essentially help companies get bigger. So that was normally a company growth strategy, go-to-market strategy, marketing strategy. Got to live in some pretty cool countries along the way. So I've lived in
Mm.
outside the U.S., Brazil, South Africa, Mozambique, India, Dubai, and the
Wow.
UAE, and Australia. And so love that. And then I switched into internal strategy. I was part of Google's central strategy team. And I actually then switched into marketing when I was at Rackspace. I came in as chief of staff to the CEO with the promise I'd roll out into the business, and that area
Mm.
was marketing. So sort of some of the cliche sales and marketing didn't work well together. Marketing spent money with wild abandon and couldn't demonstrate results. And so, I was asked to come in and bring a little bit of my sort of consulting and analytical background to play a role in marketing. And I've loved it. So I
Mm.
did that at Rackspace, then at Tableau, acquired into Salesforce, and then joined ZoomInfo. And I grew up through the sort of marketing ops demand gen side of marketing, expanded in
Mm.
top of funnel, also did a lot in e-commerce before I joined ZoomInfo. And I was actually on the customer advisory board of one of our big competitors. And one of the challenges that I faced, a lot of the product was great, was it was based on your own internal first party data, which I think, as we all know,
Yeah.
is not good. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I was really, trying to search for when I was in that role was how could I leverage a great tool, but with really, really good data. And ZoomInfo actually came calling, and it was just a perfect match because it's amazing what you can do with really good data, and then being able to reach out across sort of marketing channels, sales channels.
Mm.
And so that's how I've netted out at ZoomInfo as our CMO.
Wow. That's awesome. Um, we're going to nerd out about marketing a lot during the show, so I'm going to leave that for later on. But curious, you've lived in so many different countries. Um, if you had a choice to live anywhere right now, where would you want to live?
Whew. So I met my wife in Brazil. So I have a strong passion for there. I'm actually originally from South Africa, but if I could choose any place, I would go back to Australia. I've tried a few
Mm.
times to convince my wife to move to Sydney, and I've said I don't think she's agreed with me, but I've said if I get an opportunity a third time, I think we should go. It's
Wow.
just a wonderful country, amazing people. I do like nice weather and being by the water, and so Sydney's
Yeah.
a pretty cool spot. It is a bit far away from everything, but it's an amazing country.
Mm. What about like Mexico, just down south? You also got the water. You also got, but then I guess it's not like Australia. I guess
Yeah, well,
different types of people.
yeah, and I obviously I'm fluent in English, and I would say I was fluent in Portuguese. I'm still pretty good in Portuguese, but my Spanish is
Mm.
not as strong. So I'd, yeah, I'd have to learn that language in order to be proficient. So probably a step further than maybe going back to Brazil.
Okay, cool. Australia. All right, noted. Noted. Um, all right, let's move into the company. Let's give some love to the company. Zoom Info. I would assume 90% of our listeners already know what Zoom Info is and what they do, but maybe you can give us just a quick little glimpse into what Zoom Info is,
Yeah,
how you
sure.
guys make money, etc.
Yeah, sure. And I would imagine if I were to ask your listeners, almost all of them would say, yes, we know ZoomInfo. You're an amazing contact database, which is true.
Hmm.
But it's also only a subset of what we do and where we came from. So we're actually the best in terms of overall B2B data. So we've been ranked whether it's sort of intent data or company data, contact data, technographic information. So we have that really, really strong base of data. And then what we've tried to do is then turn that into really useful insights to say where you should focus your efforts in terms of which companies, which individuals, when, how to reach out to them, and then actually enabling you to do that. So we have a platform for marketers, so you can do display and social advertising, you can do email outreach, you can do sort of conversational intelligence. So we have a chorus, which is our sort of call recording and transcription offering. And then we're really focused, and a lot of our recent push has been how do you drive efficiency and automation? And so one of the things we talk a lot about is this idea of go-to-market plays. So across sales and marketing, how do you create these scalable motions to sort of maximize your efficacy? And then we just announced our ZoomInfo Copilot, which is all about taking all your first party and third party data together, running it through our AI, being able to then say, against my target accounts, which one should I focus on? Which people at those accounts, what messages, and then actually will draft your sort of outreach on your behalf. So it really should make all of our customers much, much more efficient. And so that's been kind of the journey that we're on. And I think, as you mentioned, we're about 35,000 customers, almost 1.3 billion in revenue. Yeah, it's a fun company to be a part of.
That's incredible. Everything that you're just talking about, automations, first and third party data, uh, drafting outreach and all that stuff, and now AI is kind of coming into the play, right? That's all. Like, yeah, we'll talk about all that stuff. But uh, company, I've done a little bit of digging. This might be our first couple of hot sauce shots. Warning. Uh, just wanted to get a sense of how large ZoomInfo is. Now, I know a lot of the information out there is public. Um, I've seen online revenues around 1.2 billion as of 2023, and now I've heard that it's actually been growing as well. But where are we at right now in terms of like revenue?
Yeah, so we're we just did our earnings call. So at the end of last year, we were at 1.25 billion, it was about 13% growth year over year. And then the other thing it's been pretty amazing to be a part of the company. We're at 40% margin. So we're a very profitable company that's also at a decent size and growing at a pretty fast clip. Which I can say is someone who gets to benefit from all of our tools and technology. Our go-to-market is just incredibly efficient, and it's because we use our own technology, our own data that allows us to do it. So yeah, it's been a great ride to be a part of so far.
Crazy. And did you guys raise any money? Like, I know ZoomInfo has been so long. Some of the data and the raises might not even be relevant anymore. But do you know the history behind that?
Yeah, that you're going to get me to drink or take a shot because I don't remember how much, because it was a few years ago. We went public just about 4 years ago, and so yeah, looks like I'm signing myself up for
All right. Okay.
for,
Okay.
for
We'll
another
be our
shot.
first one. Do you like spicy food?
Um, yeah, so I would say I enjoy spicy food, not super spicy food. So this would not be something I would be normally doing for fun. So,
Shots of hot
so
sauce.
congrats on getting me to do it. Cheers.
Because you spent some time in Brazil. Your wife is
Yeah,
Brazilian.
she she, she is.
um,
Yeah, yep, keep going.
so there's not. It's like I had never been to Brazil, but we have some team members actually listening right now that are Paraguayan. They're from Paraguay. It's not really spicy, right? The food out there. Like, do you eat a lot of spicy food? Does your wife eat a lot of spicy food too?
Um, so it's actually interesting that the southern part of Brazil does not really have spicy food, but the northern part of Brazil has really spicy food. And so it's
Mm.
interesting. It's a country almost the size of the U.S. So it's very, very different. I always, I'm sure she wouldn't love me mention this. I tease my wife because when I first met her, I was cooking some food and she said, "Oh, this is quite spicy. What spice did you put in it?" It's like, there's literally no spice. And we eventually got down to the fact that it was the pepper that I had put in the dish that she thought was pretty spicy.
Mm.
So my nose is already watering. And yeah, so definitely not in the southern part of Brazil.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. Okay, so not sure about the raise. It is public, 1.25 billion, large company. Let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. This is a
Yeah.
marketing podcast, so let's nerd out about marketing a little bit. Uh, where where are you spending your marketing dollars right now for ZoomInfo to help grow the company?
Yeah.
Right there.
So yeah, we're definitely a pretty efficient organization. So, sort of in rough numbers, we spend about a third. If you think of our total marketing budget, about a third of it on people, and about two-thirds on sort of everything else, programs, tech, whatnot. It's about 5%. It's actually a little bit under 5% on technology, and part of the reason for that is we just benefit from leveraging our own platform. It's pretty core to what we do. Within our programs budget, 80-ish percent or so goes into media and brand and sort of demand gen activities. And then the bulk of that 20% goes into events with some other stuff. So that's sort of like the rough way that our budget breaks up.
So events is under programs.
Correct. Yeah. So essentially,
Okay.
the way we think about it is people, technology. We have a small like T&E part, but sort of programs is then sort of everything else that we spend.
So that's like 60-ish% then of your entire marketing budget. It goes towards programs.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. Yeah.
I see. And then if we were to not counting people, because that, I mean, unless you disagree, like have your people budget increased like significantly, like in the last 3 years, or has it stayed pretty much the
Yeah,
same?
it stayed relatively flat despite our growth.
Yeah.
I mean, this year we grew, as I mentioned, sort of last year 13%. The year before we actually grew about 50%.
Wow.
So it's pretty significant growth. So yeah, our we've definitely through leveraging technology, through optimizing processes, through leveraging AI. I think
Mm.
we've really figured out how to just continue to be really, really efficient and more so and pushing as much as we can into actually driving demand for the business and to better serving our customers.
Okay, it's cool that you mentioned AI because there are two different camps. There's one camp that's saying because of AI and all the efficiencies that you get through AI, companies can then reduce headcount and do the same amount of work. But then there's also the second camp that says because AI is more efficient, we can keep the same headcount and do double, like do a lot more. What do you see that as a tool to do more, or do you see that as a way to reduce?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I know sort of generally people think about the rule of 40 and how do you think about your growth plus your margin together. There's been sort of writing around, particularly for companies that are profitable, your growth is worth 2 to 3 times more than your margin is in terms of the valuation for the company. So at the end of the day, like we want to make sure we have good margin, but we want to make sure even more that we're driving growth. And so I think the thing that I get excited about with AI is how can we take the very smart, capable team members we have and allow them to be even more effective and offload some of the things that are maybe less valuable, whether that's leveraging AI to figure out sort of where to focus our efforts, or leveraging Gen AI to sort of generate some of those things on the front end so that they're just doing more of the additive work on top. It's a enabler of additional success and capabilities rather than the opposite, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of big companies tend to think your way. Um, uh, we've had a lot of large companies come on the show. Unfortunately, because of VC and interest rate issues and stuff, all the pressures. A lot of the smaller companies, it's hard for them to think the same way
Yeah.
because of all the resource crunch that's happening. But good to know that you're thinking that way. Especially like all these big companies are doing layoffs. I'm sure you hear it every single other week. There's like another 15,000 people, 20% cut in staff, and it's good to know that you guys are not going. Have you guys gone through any? Yeah.
I mean, I think practically over the course of the years, we're always sort of figuring out how to pivot and optimize, where we invest. But again, I think we benefited from the fact that we've had pretty significant growth.
Yeah.
And so it's more where can we best invest our resources to make sure that we're most successful.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, okay. Diving into programs a
Yeah,
little bit
sure.
more. Media, you got brand, you got demand gen and events. What would be the breakdown of between that bucket, do you think?
So I mean, I think what I can say is relative to that 2/3 of our overall budget that sort of encompasses those things. So 80% of that is brand plus demand together, and about 20% is events. Definitely within our that combined brand and demand group, the vast majority is going into demand. In fact, when I joined, we weren't really spending anything in brand. And something that I've been really trying to do is make a case internally for like why that is so important. And so we launched our first brand campaign ever last summer, and it was really exciting to see some of the results. So it's still sort of early days, but where the same audience saw brand and demand, we actually saw
Mm,
pretty significant improvements in conversion rates. So LinkedIn, for example, they had a beta where you could do sort of brand advertising with them. we saw 93% improvement in click-through rate on the demand gen ads. So if we had spent those same dollars in demand gen, we wouldn't have seen the results. We saw improvements in win rates, sort of the end of the year is sort of another area. And then we just saw our overall efficiency for our total marketing dollars relative to ACV that we impacted going up. So I would like to get that ratio of brand to demand more in the brand camp, but I'm still in the process, as I should be, of making a case internally of, why is that the best use of our dollars?
So is it so between brand and demand gen, that one camp, would you say is like 80% demand gen and then 20% brand, or even more
Uh,
so towards demand?
it's a little bit more demand gen than that. It's sort of close to there, but it's a little bit more, a little bit more demand gen.
With brand. Okay, cool. And then you mentioned media as well as part of that, the programs. Is only a small piece of that?
No, and maybe it's just from a definitional perspective. So like when I think of demand gen and brand, a significant majority of those investments are our media investments related to that. So whether it's spending on LinkedIn and Facebook, or sort of broader display, we have our own through our marketing platform. We have a DSP, so we can do targeted advertising through that, or sort of paid search, whether it's Google, Bing, content syndication. When we're spending on direct buys through different publishers or audio, all of that fits within that demand gen bucket for us.
That all goes under demand gen. Cool. Cool, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We've seen paid ads shift so wildly over the last 7, 8 years to everything was put towards search. For example, Google search was like the king of everything for at least for B2B. And then now it seems like LinkedIn is a very powerful tool, and a lot of B2B SaaS companies are using LinkedIn, shifting a lot of budget away from search over to LinkedIn. What are you seeing? Like, what are some of the signs that you're seeing, the trends that you're seeing when it comes to like paid?
Yeah, well, so I mean, one of the things that's again a function of the fact we have our own DSP, which allows people to do like display and sort of paid social across a number of the different channels, is companies are definitely shifting in those directions. But a function for us, at least, of you can say, hey, I want to target Bob and Sally at this company. You could hit them on LinkedIn, but you could also hit them on Facebook, and you can also hit them in broader display, because we have the best professional and personal graph. So you don't just need to hit them on LinkedIn; you can hit them on other channels as well. So we actually see a decent amount of spend through our platform on Facebook at the same time, and then. I do think where display continues to struggle a little bit is you just get so much of that sort of bot traffic. And so, for companies that are more holistically trying to target, do they feel confident? And that's a big thing we've, again, worked on with our DSP, is ensuring that like what you're actually spending money on is hitting real people and getting the returns. And then personally, I mean, paid search is great for getting people at the bottom of the funnel when they have intent. And so it's always going to be a really important thing, knowing when you're talking to a CFO or a CEO and you're trying to justify why you're spending money, it's really clear to make that connection.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of research out there. So Bain and Google did some research, and I think it was the end of 2022, that found that depending on industry, 80 to 90% of buyers have a day one list, and 90% of the time they choose off that day one list. And so that means you need to be top of mind when they are, entering the market. And you may not get that if you're just focusing on sort of paid search, or you're disproportionately paying for that small percentage of people that are in the market today. And you need to do things to complement it. So that's where I think still in B2B, we're a little bit slow in recognizing the importance of sort of upper funnel activities. But I think there is that awareness that's getting there. And I really, really love the research that comes out of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. So if you're familiar with it, they wrote the book How Brands Grow, which is an amazing book. And they are the largest marketing research institute, and they've put forward a lot of research that's highlighted, the importance of share of voice and how that's tightly correlated with share of market over time. Like Benet and Fields did some of this research back in 2013, and I think the Ehrenberg Bass Institute's built on it. But I think we're slowly starting to learn lessons of B2C. Which is ultimately you're selling to individuals. Individuals have brains, and our memories work in certain ways. And emotion and stories are really important, both to create and to elicit memories. And in order to do that, you can't just do paid search. You need to more holistically advertise, hit people consistently across different channels. And so I think we're starting to see more of that motion over time.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, one of the key elements of B2B sales has to be relationships, trust and relationships, right? Because some of these sales cycles can go on for years, right? And so what's the best way? Paid ads is not going to help you build trust with these potential prospects. It's all the top of the funnel, middle funnel, mofu, tofu, right? Like these are the things that really matters. What do you think is there like a secret power, like a secret channel that you use that to build these kind of relationships?
I don't know that I have a secret channel. I think a few things that are always top of mind for me. There was a book called Descartes' Error, which was about essentially how our brains work and make decisions. And there was, in particular, they did research with a group of people who'd had damage to the part of your brain that essentially processes emotion. And what they found is that if you can't actually leverage emotion, you're incapable of making decisions. And so I think we as B2B marketers always think we're appealing to the rational part of the brain, and that's actually not true.
No.
You need both emotion and rational, and they play different roles. And actually, the sort of the rote part of our memory draws on sort of the emotional connections and associations we have, and so that's really important. So I'd say that's not a channel; that's just something that's really important to do. And then something that I really do love about the Ehrenberg Bass research is they talk about this idea of mental availability, which is your job as a marketer is in buying situations. You're just trying to increase the probability that you're recalled. And I think, as we all know, when we think about sort of different situations, like sometimes you'll think about a memory and one association will come up, and another time you'll think about that same memory and a different association will come up. It's because our brains aren't perfect. That has a ton of different information, and there are lots of different nodes that are attached together. And ideally, what you want to do is strengthen the connectivity across them. And the way to do that is actually, rather than any individual channel, is you want to make sure that across channels, your messaging is consistent and it's as distinctive as possible, so it stands out. Because there's also research that shows that while as a marketer, I'd love to think people think of ZoomInfo and they think these things, and they think of our competitor and they think those things. The reality is ZoomInfo customers generally think of probably the same set of things, or very similar sets of things, as the customers of our competitors. And so it's much more about actually making sure you're thought of in the buying situation rather than you're thought of for exactly this thing. And so I think that's kind of the way that I think about it. Channels each have their own benefits and values, and then potentially reach slightly different audiences at different sort of parts of their day, or sort of in different mindsets. But it's that way of thinking about how you use channels in unison that's really important. And maybe just one thing I'll add is because everyone wants to do integrated marketing, but maybe don't do a good job of it. We were doing sort of an internal test just in some of our ABX programs, and found a pretty significant improvement in terms of sort of better win rates, faster sort of time to close, and just more efficiency in terms of the way we think about it is sort of ACV at the bottom of the funnel relative to a demo or an MQL, higher average deal price, all associated with that integration across the campaigns and aligned messaging to those same sets of people in your buying groups. So anyway, not the exact answer, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's so interesting that you mentioned that the mental availability. What is it that you want your customers or your current prospects that you're working on? What do you want them to think about when they think ZoomInfo? Is it in line with what they're currently thinking, or is there anything? Is it still kind of like a struggle to try to get them to think a certain way
Yeah.
about ZoomInfo?
So when we reached out, and we did this just over a year ago, and we were trying to figure out, hey, when you're in the go to market space and you're thinking about optimizing your go to market and driving more growth, like what are the thoughts, the feelings, and emotions that come to mind? What are sort of the pain points you have, and then how do you think about sort of us and our competitors? The things that was actually interesting was the pain points and the sort of the use cases that the broader market is thinking about. Largely, none of us were speaking to. Which was actually kind of fascinating. So in some ways, it was good. It meant there was a lot of opportunity for all of us to weigh in.
Yeah.
But the main things that came up were people feel sort of awash with data. They have disparate data sources, that they generally feel like the data quality is not very good, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to sort of pull it together and drive insights. And so this idea of unlocking insights was something that we focused on. Secondly, I think sales and marketing want to come together and create a holistic customer experience, but they don't generally do it very well. Even within marketing, it's sometimes hard to get your different teams to sort of play nicely together. And so really effectively engaging customers was sort of the second piece. And the third one was around, I need to drive more efficiency and productivity and just my overall go-to-market funnel. And so we framed it as sort of unlock insights, engage customers, win faster, as sort of the key things that we help our customers do. And then there were some specific use cases that we found were sort of larger in terms of the potential prize if we could solve those. And I would just say, yeah, we spent time identifying those and try and keep those to ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's yeah. I mean that's where you guys have such a strong brand. Sometimes it could be a good thing. Sometimes it can be a bad thing if you're trying to pivot, right? Because people all know of ZoomInfo of a certain way, and if you're trying to add new things to it, it's kind of like that. That's sometimes a big challenge,
Well, yeah, I
right?
mean,
The rebrand.
related to that, I mean, something that was even interesting to me, it was a year ago, and I was talking to some of the analysts in the space who theoretically should be really knowledgeable about who we are. And I was talking to them. These were on the marketing side, and I was talking to them about intent data. And they said, "Yeah, I mean, ZoomInfo is pretty new to the intent space." And I said, "Well, respectfully, that's actually entirely incorrect. We helped start the space. It was back in 2014 that Bombora launched. We were one of their initial partners, and we sort of together took sort of their raw signals and put our intelligence on top of it, and really created the intent space." And that's why we're ranked number one in G2 and have been for really over 3 years now, every quarter, for intent data. But in the marketing side, people aren't aware of that. And so that's just an educational process. And as you said, sometimes when you have a really strong brand in a certain area, there's a lot you need to do to transition how people think about the company. So that's good. It's a marketing problem. It means either I can do my job effectively and I can change it, or it's something that I need to look at myself and say, hey, why are we not doing a good job changing perception?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's crazy. Quickly shifting gears away from brand demand gen,
Yeah.
which very, very important. You mentioned events,
Yes.
20% of your spend right now. That is this the percentage that you want to be at, or you think because a lot of companies are investing more and increasing amount in
Yeah.
events, it's just coming back with a vengeance after COVID? Like, talk to
Yeah.
us about events.
And actually, so it is an area that we're investing more this year. We're investing more than last year. When you look at all of our different channels, the one far and away that is driving sort of enterprise ACV and pipeline is events for us. So it's 90% plus of the pipeline and ACV that we get out of events is in enterprise. And that's so
Mm,
for us, our enterprise customers, they grow faster, they're stickier. And so there's a lot of value for us to leverage that effectively. And so it's really high ROI. So we're trying to figure out how to do it with more investment and continue to maintain the efficiency that we have. We have a great team that works on it, that's small but mighty. And a lot of the success that we've had. So trade shows have been good. So like some of the bigger conferences that are out there, but a lot of the success we've had is the smaller ones that are tailored around specific thought leadership topics, where we're bringing in CMOs and CROs and RevOps, go-to-market ops leaders, and talking about how to leverage go-to-market plays to drive alignment and efficiency, how to effectively take AI and use it within your go-to-market motions, things like that. And those tend to be our most effective events. And so we've
yeah.
been leaning in more heavily there, and are going to continue to do that. Just because, as you said, developing those relationships with those leaders, it's hard to do at scale.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
ultimately, since decision making, a big part of your decision making is down to relationships and emotional connections and things like that. It's particularly powerful. And maybe a bit of a random medical aside, I was reading a book. It's called The Leader's Brain, and they were doing research on a related topic, but what they found out was oxytocin, which is known many times for bonding. In-person connection is a really good way to release oxytocin, either from just physical connection, so a hug or a handshake, but also eye contact. And you can't do that over Zoom. And so what they've actually found is they've done tests where they had people look at each other in the eye before they would do an experiment, and they'd actually
Mm.
perform better just by doing that. And it's because you're creating those connections with individuals, and you obviously can do that in in-person events, and you can't do that
Mm.
remotely.
Yeah. Um, hot sauce question.
Okay.
Because events, there are good ones and bad ones. What would you say is like one of the worst events that you've been to in the last like 12 months, and why?
One of the worst events I've been to.
Where you were just like, oh man, like they shouldn't run this one again.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of what that would be, and then I'll decide if I want to answer it. Let
I'm
me.
getting my hot sauce ready.
Yeah, I think you're probably. I think we're probably gonna have to get our hot sauce ready. I don't know that there's necessarily one that I want to call out. So let's do the hot sauce, and then I'll think of a way to give a generic answer to that question too. Um,
The politically, um, or like I don't know what the word is, but like
yeah.
yeah. Anyways,
Cheers.
okay. Without giving the name of the event, why
Um,
was this event bad? After you get your water.
um, so yeah, I'm just thinking if I need a little more water. Um, so a few reasons that it wasn't strong. They had invited. It was for. I'm trying to think how specific I can be. It was for a really large sporting event. They'd obviously spent a lot of money in having sort of senior executives there. Uh, I went. Uh, at no point in time did anyone from the company ever speak to me. I had the ticket. I got into the
Mm,
area. I literally didn't speak to anyone from the company. I was just amazed that like how much money they had put in into it, and
mm.
they just lost any opportunity to like develop a relationship. The whole purpose of creating this small event was to, I would
How many
think,
people? How many people were there?
uh 30.
Okay, so very intimate, and they couldn't even talk to you with 30 people in the room.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was interesting because I mean I was chatting to some of the other leaders there. I mean there was a great collection of folks. They did a good job bringing them in, and it was I actually was trying to find someone from this company. At one point in time, I identified one of them. I just said, hey, this is a wonderful event. Thanks so much for the opportunity. And they said, yeah, great. Glad you're enjoying it. Whatnot. Didn't even ask me like what company I was from or anything. It was, and it in no way
Wow.
made me more likely to buy from them in the future. And I would imagine it probably cost them, I don't know, several $1,000s to have hosted each of us there. So it
Several
was,
thousand each, so times, so it's like in the tens of thousands, like
yeah,
20,000, thirty
yeah.
thousand, kind of.
It was a significant amount of money. So anyway, it was unfortunate because they chose a very good event, but I think missed out on some of the tactical ones. Where I've had other companies do similar events, and they knew who I was. The company they like many times they'll try and have sort of one of the people there that I've had an interaction with in the past, and really used it as a way not to talk about their products, but to build a relationship so that I was more likely and willing to sort of have candid conversations with them in the future and say, hey,
Mm,
person A,
yeah.
these are things I'm struggling with, like could you help, let's brainstorm together. And I think they just missed out on that opportunity.
So the event on Seattle that I'm hosting, curious to hear your thoughts. The structure is going to look like um, general conversations. By the way, it's going to be like 70 people in a room, just to give you
uh,
some preface it. About 70 founders, pre-seed to Series A. General kind of intro, walking in, meet and greet for 30 minutes. A break in between to highlight the sponsors, where they're going to play a Wheel of Fortune game with they can only land on four things. Number one is a hot sauce shot. Number two is a tequila shot. Number three, they get to pitch themselves, which is what they want to land on. And so we'll give a bigger box for that. And then for the last one is they got to pitch another founder that they met and their business. So it's a reverse pitch.
yeah, wow, that's a cool idea.
So it's a fun way to recognize the sponsors, but also like so that they get value because sponsors want value, but
Yeah,
also in an entertaining way because anyone will pay for entertainment, right?
yeah.
So that's kind of like the intermission. In between that will be 2 breakout sessions. So we're going to break out all the founders by groups. So 8 founders in blockchain, 8 founders in AI, and then open networking. Um, do I know in the startup world, especially in Silicon Valley and New York, like these kind of events are very popular. How common are events like this in the enterprise space? Like, would it ever fly?
Um, so it potentially depends like what level of person you're trying to bring in. I mean, I think just a function of sort of the bigger the company you're at, the more senior you get within companies, you just get a lot of outreach for potential things, including saying like, "Hey, we'll give you something really cool to come." Um, and so I think it's a question for me is just what are you doing on the front end to actually like stand out to like clearly articulate value. And like the way that I'm normally thinking about it, when I'll get an email and I'm looking is, am I going to get some sort of insight or thought leadership that I wouldn't be able to get at otherwise, or am I going to get a chance to sort of interface with people who I think would be really helpful from a networking point of view or whatnot.
Hmm.
And so I'd say that's those are probably two key things for me in terms of uh, it being a like fun and sort of differentiated event. I don't know that it would necessarily get me to go, but it would make that event much more memorable. So then the second time around, or sort of if I was talking to someone else, I'd be like, hey, I went to this really fascinating event and they had this cool sort of way of surfacing things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would wonder, is it as effective on sort of the draw? I don't know. But in terms of making it
Hmm.
memorable and lasting and potentially willing to talk about it, 100%.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Because I mean, yeah, I guess there's two big like for an enterprise C-suite like yourself. You're really going for two things, like you said, right? You're either going there to meet other cool people, or you're going there to learn something that you wouldn't have, right? So if the room was just full of other C-suites like yourself, plus the spinner wheel where it's just purely focused on networking, um, would that you think that would be cool for the enterprise space?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things. So let's say you've gone to the perfect event. It's some great thought leadership topics and some like some fascinating people. Um, many times it could be the end of a long day, and you're not necessarily willing to speak up. I've
It
been
is.
surprised how many times we've done events and different ones we've tried and some have worked, some haven't. But how do you sort of extract the participation out? Because it's normally those first few people that need to get engaged and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, now I'm willing
And then
to,
it goes.
ask the silly question or whatnot." And so I
Yeah,
think the big thing about making, I think, an event successful is how do you draw out those initial people to say something so that
it's the
it then
hardest thing.
facilitates the conversation. And so that's why I thought the idea was actually like it was a pretty interesting one because if I were in the room and then you sort of that came up, I was like, oh wow, wouldn't have thought of that. And it just makes it a little bit more novel and sort of lets your guard down a little bit. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do is how do we sort of facilitate that honest conversation where people are actually going to get value versus just saying like, oh, okay, I came, I listened to someone, I'm probably going to forget about it.
Exactly, and especially like I've like so this the whole point of these events, like for at least for me, is networking because founders just want to network with other founders. It's like you said, how do you lower the guard after a 12-hour long day? They probably drove down and they paid $20 for parking, and now they're in a room with 50 people that they don't know, which is supposed to be a good thing because you get to meet with 50 new people. But then how do you lower the guards, lower the egos and everything? Because everyone has
Right.
egos, especially when you get to that level. And it's just like, yeah, games like this or icebreaker games and breakout sessions and all that stuff. Just playing around with a lot of different things. One of
Yeah.
the things I want to do is like a founder squid game. Like I actually did one in Toronto. We had like 60 founders come out to that one. But
Really?
um, but yeah, like events, I'm really bullish on that. Um, and it sounds like you think about events as well, but more so third party events. You guys don't plan your own events.
No. So I was actually going to say it's our first party events where we've seen the most success, either sort of purely first party events or at sort of broader trade shows. The first party events that we do sort of around them is where we see most of the benefit. And yeah, I think where we're trying to figure out is I would say a year and a half ago, we were just trying a lot of different things, and there wasn't a holistic approach and strategy. Our current sort of events leader, I think, has done a really great job at being thoughtful around what are the key things we're trying to achieve, what's the best way to bring those to life, driving a lot of success in the events we've done, and now we're trying to go maybe a step further, things we probably wouldn't have signed off on a year ago, but because we've had success in the things that we're doing, we're willing to go a step further. But it really is about for us, as I mentioned, like we do have some brand perception change that we need to do. So there are some of those broader reach events. There's a lot of interacting with a new set of people, particularly marketing leaders,
Yes.
where we're trying to get better depth. And then I do think making sure that our customers feel, and because we're actively trying to do it, we're providing value. We're trying to help lead the category and thinking about how do you drive go-to-market effectiveness and efficiency.
Yeah.
And then hopefully then they come to us when they're then facing these issues and say, yeah, I'd love to talk about this. And as an outcome of that, hopefully they'll become customers or bigger customers. But ultimately, we're leaning into how do we provide value to our customers. And so I think that's how we're trying to think about events. And then to your point, I do think a big part of the value you can provide is because we have a decent customer base. How do you connect those customers together and actually help them forge
That
real
could be
relationships
that could be a
versus,
huge
yeah,
one. Yeah.
versus just showing up at the event and sort of maybe having a sort of a glass of wine and eating some food and quietly sitting there and then leaving right away because you didn't have any common prompt that would facilitate a conversation, such as, can you imagine being up on stage and potentially having to do a tequila shot? I'm glad that wasn't me. And then you can have a conversation with someone else about it. So
And then everyone will come up to you and be like, now it doesn't have to be an awkward conversation saying, hey, Brian, what do you do? Like,
yeah,
I work at this company. Just like, that was hilarious tequila shot. And then now you got the ice is broken
yeah,
like automatically.
it's
Even if you weren't on the stage, now you can talk to someone else and be like, would you have chosen? Like, imagine there was one option where you can choose what you want to do. Like, would you
yeah.
have chosen tequila shot or would you have chosen? And then the conversation kind of goes on. Um, okay, hot sauce question here. Curious, how much do you guys? What are some of the like? How much are you guys spending at some of the more expensive first party events that you guys are hosting? Like, give me the upper end, and then give me the lower end.
Um, so I mean, I would say we're generally pretty efficient on all the events we do. The first party events, like we don't do a big user conference, so that just sort of it significantly lowers the bar. I mean, we're normally thinking of
Yeah,
getting like 30 to 40 people there. So I mean, it's normally in the realm of 35,000, maybe 40,000 on the high end. But it is a function of yeah, just being more efficient. We do spend more on third party events, just because those are, if you want to be the sort of title
yeah.
sponsor at like a Forrester or a Gartner or something like that, those are just more expensive.
Is the ROI there? What's the ROI between those big events versus the first types of events?
Yeah, and so I think it's a question a little bit of how you measure it. So I mean, with those big events, obviously, if you're sort of a title sponsor, you're hoping you're getting awareness. I mean, there's the sort of the pure leads you get out of those. From a lead perspective, they're not as good, but you do get some of the awareness, and that's where it's a little bit harder to measure. Because I think of
Measure.
we had a big presence last year at Forrester's conference. And I've had a lot of people since then who reached out and said, wow, we saw you there and, we didn't realize you were doing, whatnot, but it doesn't show up in the leads. But from a pure
Mm,
ROI perspective, those smaller events, way more impactful.
way more. Yeah.
Just because, we know who was there, and then we know if they purchased down the road, and we don't necessarily know for like one of those bigger ones, if just because they were there, that played a meaningful role or not.
Yeah. I mean, also for one big event, like how much are you guys spending? Like 200 something K, 200K maybe sometimes?
So some of those bigger ones, like the title sponsorship, can be a few hundred thousand. So it
A few 100,000.
can be pretty
So for the
expensive.
cost of that, you could almost run 10 smaller events or five medium events of 100 to 200 people, which is equally as effective, but then you get to control who's in the room. I don't know. Do you guys do a lot of like run your own medium size events, like 100 to 200 people events as well?
Yes. I mean, our sweet spot is that sort of I'd call it like 30 to 50. And
30 to
so
50.
we do a lot like in-person ones there. We do some virtual ones around the same range. That we found it. If you get too much larger, it's really hard to have a conversation. In fact, I think normally around
Of
like
course.
30-ish is sort of the best for the conversation.
Yeah.
And then too much smaller that then may not merit the investment that you put into it. But yeah, that's kind of an area that we've seen a lot of success.
Yeah. Um, um, what are you guys like? So top channel by ROI.
Uh,
What would you say?
yeah, it's those small events.
Small events.
Yeah, in terms of total ACV impact, it's not those, but from an ROI perspective, it's those, and so that's why we're going to try and lean in more heavily this year and see if we can get more goodness from.
Nice. Um, we talked we talked before about potentially disclosing LTV and CPA. I'm nervous about asking this question, but do you have an idea like what is like the cost of acquisition, because you guys are spending on a lot of different channels, and then what's the LTV? Like you got 35,000 paying customers right now.
Yeah. So what I can say on that one is the last time we disclosed it, our LTV over CAC was over 10.
Wow.
Um, and interestingly, because I don't know that this is necessarily what you would think, but we're more effective on the enterprise side. So like we're still good on the SMB side, but I think a lot of times you think, oh, enterprise, it's a ton of upfront work, it's a long term sort of investment, but we actually do see that to be a much more efficient over time return.
Mm.
And so it's just one of the areas that we continue to try and invest.
More expensive to get in the door, but once you get in, a lot more sticky,
Much higher
bigger LTV.
Much higher return. And one of the things that just maybe a sort of last note on that one that I thought was interesting, this was actually, I thought about it because of some of the Ehrenberg Bass research. And then I looked at it when I was at Tableau, and then did the same thing here at ZoomInfo, is if you look at cohorts of customers over time. So in oversimplify it to, let's say, enterprise versus mid-market versus SMB, but imagine some additional criteria there. They tend to grow in fairly similar ways in year 1, 2, 3, 4. When you look at sort of your 19 or your 2019 and 2020 versus 2021 cohorts. And so a lot of what you're doing to drive your sort of customer growth is bringing the right customers in the door. And so it is really important thinking about what is that sort of efficacy by those groups, and then making sure you're bringing in the right folks.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, got a quick joke for you.
Cool.
And then we'll move to the final part of the segment, which is just kind of understanding you and your background, and to help some of the aspiring listeners that want to become a CMO one day in the future, kind of how to follow along your journey. But quick joke: if you laugh, you do a shot of hot sauce. If you don't laugh, I'll do a shot of hot sauce. Very simple.
Okay.
All right. You've gone on dates before, right? Like
I
on dates
have.
with some
I have.
girls. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're married, so you probably have gone on one or two dates. So why did the woman go on a date with a mushroom? Why did she decide to go on a date with a mushroom?
Already laughing. Why?
Because he's a fun guy. A fun guy.
Yeah, that got me. It's sad when even the setup gets me laughing. So
I'll do it with you just because that was a
um,
good that was a good reaction.
yeah.
Cheers.
There's
Which part of Seattle are you based in?
um,
Whew.
Kirkland. So just across, just across the water.
I think I'm going to be in downtown. If I stick around for the week, I'll let you know. But I might just be there for Friday, Saturday. We'll see.
I did not choose the right hot sauce. Anyway,
Okay, let's learn about your background a little bit, and then we'll, listeners that have made it all the way through. We're 52 minutes. Obviously, you love your marketing techniques and tactics and your background a little bit. But now let's understand kind of your backstory. How was life like for you, for Bryan, growing up? Like did you always want to get into become a CMO? Like was that like a goal of yours, or you just take it one step at a time and kind of led you here?
No, I definitely did not think I was going to be a CMO or a marketer. In fact, when I was at Rackspace and our CEO said, "I want you to join marketing," I said, "Taylor, I don't think that's the place you want to put me." And he said, "No, I think you'll actually be, you'll be good at it and you'll really enjoy it. Why don't you give it a try?" And so we agreed to do it, but that it was actually I much more thought of myself being more of like a general manager, moving into like a COO type role. And he was right.
Mm,
I really, I mean, I really have enjoyed it, but it was not sort of the thing that I focused on. Yeah, it was always like I've loved strategy, I've loved sort of analysis, and I really love driving sort of performance and results, which I think has made me an effective marketer. But it wasn't sort of what I would have expected.
yeah. What did your mom and dad do? Like, what was their, I guess,
Backgrounds.
their job? Yeah, their backgrounds.
Yeah, my mom. So she was an attorney, and she actually went back and got her MSW and worked with abused women and kids. So a bit of a
Mm,
career change there. And then my dad did international trade, originally from South Africa. He did that in South Africa, and then when we moved to the U.S., he did it in the U.S. as well.
wow. So you were you born in South Africa?
Yeah, yeah. And I was 6 when I moved to the U.S. So I was still small, unfortunately, too young to keep my accent.
Were you a fun guy? Sorry, it's just a for part of the joke. So he came from South Africa to U.S. Uh, and so that was just for work purposes, or he came and then found a job. But like, what was?
No, yeah. So yeah. I mean, probably more information than you want. My parents met out on vacation in the Caribbean, and
Mm,
so my dad came to California for a couple weeks. My mom quit her job, moved to South Africa. They got married, and then we're there obviously for a while until we all moved back to the States. So my dad stopped his
mm,
job there and then took a job in the U.S. as part of moving back with my mom to California.
mm. Could that be why you also like beaches and water because your parents kind of that's kind of how they met?
It is, and in fact, they retired back to the Caribbean. Yeah, no, I that, and I think it has a lot to do with why I love traveling and living in different countries and
Your, par-
experiencing different cultures. So yeah, it's
your parents,
yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. What was the we get influence like so early on from our parents and people around us, and a lot of times these things stick around with us for years and years, a lifetime sometimes.
Yeah.
What do you think you picked the most from your mom, and then what one from your dad that helped drive you to 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 make you who you are today, where you're successful and you're running a big billion-dollar company essentially? What did you pick up? Maybe we'll start. You can decide, starting with your mom or
Which
your
one
dad.
first? Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I mean I've taken so much from them. So my mom was just always very thoughtful and very analytical, and something she actually did when we were kids, because as kids you always push back on your parents.
Yeah.
Is she would say, you have one chance to push back, so you better make your best argument. And it really forced me to try and be thoughtful about how I was going to make my case. And sometimes, she would
Oh.
let us win. Sometimes, many times, we wouldn't. But I think that focus on really trying to make an effective case and influence others is something that I really appreciate um, from her. In my dad, so he's just incredibly creative, and just I think he thinks about the world in a different way that is it's less my skill set. But I've
Mm.
definitely like appreciated how he thinks about things, and it's definitely encouraged me to try and think a little bit more out of the box when I approach different situations. And so I think
Wow.
from like a pure work perspective, those are the things that I would call out. Something also that I just I try and do is be as empathetic as possible, and sort of see things from sort of other people's points of view and perspective. And I think I got that from both of them.
From both your mom and dad. They're both empathetic people.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's exactly, well, this is going full circle, but this is exactly how you described yourself as a CMO, where you had the analytical side, kind of thoughtful. That was the consulting data side of your CMO hat. And then you got the creative side that you didn't think you had, but you've been nurturing through your dad for many years. And it's so fascinating to hear this. That's incredible. Anything that you picked up along the way from like uncles or cousins or whatever you think that helped you a lot along the way throughout your career journey?
Um, so I have the benefit, particularly including through my wife, of having family in Brazil and then in South Africa as well. It is just, I think sometimes you can get very just focused on your own sort of perspective of the world, and so having sort of that diversity of point of view and sort of understanding and different cultures and whatnot. I just, and having now worked in many different countries, that it's really, really important, particularly as an international company, to realize that the way that we do things in Seattle or the way that we do things in the U.S. isn't the way
Yeah.
that it necessarily works in other places. And if you are going to
No.
try and grow globally, you need to understand those local realities. And sort of that can apply to sort of how you do business. It can apply to sort of how you message things. It can even sometimes apply to the colors that you use that have different connotations in different contexts that you may not be aware of.
Mm,
And so, yeah, I would say of the many things I've learned from my family, that would be one of them.
cool. Okay, one last question, and then we'll wrap up. This kind of pertains to all that you've talked about with traveling and everything. If you could eat a pill right now that you can learn any language and any language that you can, and you'll just pick it up tomorrow, and then you also had the opportunity to work and start your career. Let's say you're 21 years old or 20 years old, and you can start your career in any country right now.
What would it be?
Where would it be,
Yeah,
and what
so
language would you speak?
I always wanted to live and work on every continent. I would have imagined that going to Europe would have been one of the first ones that I would have done, and it's the one that I haven't yet done. So I would love to work somewhere in Europe. Italy is one of my favorite countries, and so I'd probably say Italian, and getting to work in Italy, even though
Really?
economically I don't know that would be sort of the best,
Economically? Yeah.
one of the best ones. But yeah, if I could take a magic pill and sort of be able to work in that country and have be very fluent and have a comfortable lifestyle, I think that probably would be it. I also just have a lot of good friends there, a number of which I met when I was working in Dubai, who were Italian, that were there. But yeah, somewhere in Europe, potentially. Also, Spain is another amazing country that I could imagine living and working in as well.
Okay,
Um,
let's add a caveat. What if money mattered for you and growth? Like you wanted to be in a place where like growth was, you wanted to be in rising tides or whatever that
yeah,
phrase is.
yeah, yeah. It's tough. I mean, right now, I mean, Europe holistically hasn't experienced a lot of growth. A lot of the world's not experienced a lot of growth.
Hmm.
I, I, I mean, I don't
Same
know.
answer.
I'd love to go somewhere back to Latin America. Then if
Oh,
some
Brazil, maybe.
Brazil was an amazing experience. Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot of obviously family and friends there, so it would be a place that I wouldn't mind going back to, but I probably wouldn't need as much of the magic pill on the language side.
You
Maybe
wouldn't
just
need the magic pill.
some refresher courses.
Yeah. Well, Brian, thanks so much for coming on. This was a super fun call, and would love to probably, like, I don't know, maybe we'll get you back on round two. We're going back to our previous 85 guests right now. We're trying to schedule round two, but maybe round two is around the corner.
It sounds good, and have a personal challenge to prevent you from getting me to drink any more hot sauce.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Where can we learn more about you and your personal? Are you anywhere on social, like any platforms?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to track me down. So it's my first name Bryan, Bryan, last name Law, Law, and you can find me there. And yeah, I love learning from others. So to the extent you want to reach out and share some thoughts, I'm game.
Cool, cool. Yeah, we're connected too. So yeah, I know you post pretty actively, so we'll keep in touch there. Well, thanks, Brian, for
Yeah,
coming on, and we'll talk to you very soon.
thanks. Really appreciate it.
Well, guys, that's it for another spicy episode of Marketing on Mars. I'm really not sure who got burned more, my taste buds or the guest taste buds. My mouth is on fire. Real talk though, if you're not already subscribed, what are you waiting for? Each episode I make is basically an unedited, raw dinner with some of the leading marketing voices. We've got a bunch of CEOs, founders, and CMOs lined up to face the hot sauce challenge. They tell us the truth or they take a shot at hot sauce. We're on almost every single platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and more. There's really no excuse. Until next time, Martians, keep it hot and keep it real.